Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Kelly Stone on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts, and I am on with another broad named Kelly today. This is Kelly Stone, who is running for the Railroad Commissioner in Texas. Hi, Kelly.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so thank you for joining me, and I will start with the obvious first question, which is, what the heck is a Railroad Commissioner and what do they do?
So it's interesting. The Texas Railroad Commission was founded in 1891 by a liberal governor, Governor Hogg, because he was trying to deal with the monopolies that were happening in the railroad at the time. And they were, jacking up prices on certain people and not others and practicing, discriminatory practices. And so he created the Railroad Commission in order to, make things more equitable. But about 10 years later, Spindletop happened when, oil was discovered. They were trying to find water, but it was, oil. And so they were like, oh, well, the Railroad Commission is already regulating and we have nothing else that does that. So they can regulate oil and gas too. So basically, since the inception, the Railroad Commission has regulated oil and gas and pipelines. And there are actually 3 commissioners that serve 6-year terms. So every 2 years, one of their seats comes up. And it's been historically a Republican commission, and there has not been a Democrat on the commission in more than 20 years.
And so this is a statewide seat in Texas?
It is. It's quite powerful to be, handling oil and gas and pipelines. But it's hidden because people are like, oh, railroads. And so I've been getting a lot of messages about light rail, and it's like, no. And so it's really important that voters understand, what's at stake, of course, regarding climate change and all of those things that they affect with their decisions and or lack thereof, so to speak.
So what made you decide that this was something that you wanted to run for?
So, yeah, I don't think any child ever thought, when I grow up, I want to be a Texas Railroad Commissioner, right? And I have been an educator for all of my career. Even in high school, I was in the Texas Association of Future Educators. I was always going to be some sort of educator. But I've worked in higher education for most of my career, and I've also done stand-up comedy for the last 13 years. Which Jon Stewart was one of my, muses, if you will, that led me in that direction. And so edutainment has been something that I've really tried to focus on. And I ended up in a situation this last year teaching at the university, and I used to teach policy classes. They were called family policy, which graduating seniors, when it's, the capstone course, their final semester, I taught the family policy class, which was about, becoming engaged citizens. And it was about laws, regulations, and policies that affect individuals and families at the local, state, and federal level. And so that was kind of my breadwinner. And I required a book called You Can't Do That, Dan Moody, which is about the youngest governor ever to serve in the state of Texas, who was also, he was the youngest attorney general, and he was the first to successfully prosecute members of the KKK. And so I was, teaching my students, like, one person can make a difference. And then I ended up being targeted as too liberal, and I'm giving air quotes right now as I say that, by an extremist right-wing organization that put an operative in a couple of my classes. And the university ended up not renewing my teaching contract. And so I found myself at this crossroads of, what do I do now with my, my life and whatnot. And then so I paddled a canoe race this summer. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Texas Water Safari, but it is known as the world's toughest canoe race. And in my training and my practicing and whatnot is where I could actually see pipelines that cut through the river. And there are places that you can only see really if you paddled there. There's no other access because it's so much private property around, so you can't just drive up. And there was one place that I paddled past where there were 4 pipelines in a row. And there were 4 signs on either side of the river that were like, don't screw up here. And the emergency contact phone numbers on each sign were in different states. And so that led me to asking questions as a single mom, just like, who's looking out for me and why is this? And that sort of led me. And then in the course of my race this year, I broke my boat in half and I rebuilt it with sticks and zip ties and tape. And I finished the race in 78 hours. So I was kind of like, Kelly, you can do anything. And so I thought, why not, if they kicked me out of my classroom for being too liberal, maybe I'm doing something right if people are noticing. And I'm going to take my, my teaching to a statewide level and help educate voters about what's going on with the Railroad Commission and what we can do to speak up for our safety, for our environment, so that we have clean air and water. So that's a long answer.
So what are some of the things that you would like to see the misnamed Texas Railroad Commission doing? What are some of the issues that you're really focused on and the things that you hope that they can change?
So I'm really glad that you also said misnamed, because that's very clear. And yet to change the name of the commission, it requires a constitutional amendment, because a constitutional amendment is what created the Railroad Commission. And there has not been the political will to put that amendment forth. Although this year in 2019, in a mid-term election, we had 10 constitutional amendments on our ballot in Texas this year. And so a constitutional amendment is not an unheard of thing. So I certainly want to advocate and push for a name change. But that has to happen through the state legislature, which would require me, to gain some allies in the state legislature, and hopefully we will flip Texas in 2020. But so certainly a name change. Other issues that the Railroad Commission is facing or dealing with is flaring and fracking has begun to happen exponentially more. In Texas, we actually are responsible for 51% of the nation's venting and flaring of natural gas. For the entire United States, Texas accounts for 51% of that. And in 2010, the Railroad Commission gave 500 permits for flaring, which is where they burn off the natural gas, but they are also allowed to just let it vent into the air. But in 2018, they gave out 5,500 permits to give you an idea of how much flaring is now taking place. And so stopping that immediately, like not granting those permits to allow for the flaring and making those companies responsible for handling the fossil fuels that they are, springing forth, but they're not finding profitable. Right now, we have an excess of natural gas, but the demand is not there. So dealing with that. And honestly, I would like to ban fracking. And I know that some people will clutch their pearls over that. But that's a really radical thing. But we are experiencing earthquakes in places in Texas that never have happened in the history of their geographical location, and it is directly related to fracking. So those are some of the issues that I want to combat. Because climate change, the irreversible effects of climate change are upon us in 2030 is what is estimated. And this is the 2020 election. And so we've only got a decade to really, do radical change in order to make a difference.
So do you think that a Democrat can win statewide office in Texas? I look through some of the statewide offices now, and it looks like it's mostly, if not all, Republicans. And, I think we all watched Beto run for Senate, of course, in 2018 and, fell short of that. So what does it take to get a Democrat to win a statewide office in Texas?
I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, but it has happened in our past. And Texas actually used to be blue. And so I think this is the year, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion, 2016 changed everything. And so it's a different game now. And I think that the incumbent, the Republican incumbent for this position, was elected in 2014 in a different, sandbox, if you will, with different rules. And so I think as an outsider who is not from inside the industry, perpetuating like the fox guarding the hen house, I think that that's refreshing. A lot of polls have said, right, that people that voted for Trump would have voted for Bernie, that's so crazy to me. But people really want change. And so I think that is what I am trying to energize and ignite and excite in the state of Texas. And the last Democrats that were elected to statewide office in Texas were Jim Hightower, who was an ag commissioner. And he, is a very, left fellow, and he's helped found Our Revolution, Texas. And he wrote the book, There's Nothing in the Middle of the Road But Yellow Stripes and Armadillos, right? Like you can't be in the middle. And he was our second to last statewide elected Democrat. And Gary Morrow, who is also, very environmentally sensitive. He was our land commissioner for 3. So those were our last 2 Democrats elected to statewide office. So I think that is something is change. And I genuinely think that's what folks are seeking.
As you're going around and talking to people and working on your campaign, do people know about this race? Is this a commission that they even realize they vote for? I feel like a lot of these kind of positions are the kind that you get to the ballot box and go, oh, wait, was I supposed to think about that one too?
No, you're spot on. I mean, and honestly, it's going to be the 4th. It's a down ballot race, but it's the 4th office on the ballot before they get to, all the judges and all their local officials and even, their state representatives. Railroad Commission is high on the ballot because it is a statewide race. But you're right. I think most people are like, well, I don't really know. This name has, a tilde in it or, like whatever. She sounds like a she. Like people, I think, vote based on that. And so I do want people to be informed and educated. And I mean, as an educator, I always, shared the League of Women Voters Guides with all of my classes. And I would encourage them to like take their notes and go in and be informed. And so that's what I have been working on. And I just spoke to a group in Wimberley this last weekend, and they a lot of the folks in that room who were very active and engaged Democrats, they didn't quite realize that there are 3 railroad commissioners and that they hold 6-year terms. And so I got some messages back that they were like, you really could make a difference, being one of 3. And so that's been my biggest goal and helping people understand, because they start telling me, somebody told me that they didn't want to vote for me because they like the art on the trains and they didn't want me to change it. And I was like, oh, muffin, that's not what this is. And there's a couple of big issues too with pipelines, essentially what these companies are doing with their venting and their flaring with the natural gas. The natural gas is not profitable to them, but the oil is. And so that's why they're just letting it go or, burning it. Or it is profitable to them if they can export it. And so that's why many of these pipelines they're trying to put in, there's a 450-mile one that they're putting in from West Texas to Corpus Christi, and a 430-mile pipeline from West Texas to Houston. And that's to get them to export, because those are our, port cities. And the Railroad Commission is allowing these companies to come in and take over people's land through eminent domain because they're claiming that they are for public use, although we take on all the risk with none of the reward. It's for their profit. And one of those pipelines would go through the Edwards Aquifer, which is in Central Texas, that 1.5 million people get their drinking water from. So there's a lot of important information that people need to be aware of to make an informed decision. So that is absolutely my goal.
So you've talked some about how being an educator sort of informs your campaigning and your campaign style. What about being a stand-up comic? You know, how it seems like sort of an obvious but unusual sort of path to running for office. How does that help prepare you for the kind of things you need to do when you're running for office?
You know, it's interesting. So I've been in a lot of weird basements, you know, like hoping for people's validation, you know, through laughter. And I think so far, you know, I've had to walk into rooms and be like, hello, everyone, I am Kelly Stone. And I don't know that anything else I've ever done would have trained me for doing that other than comedy. There was a day that I was driving to an event in Houston, and my brother was super nervous for me. And he was like, this is political and this is a big deal. And he got me kind of riled up about it. And as I was driving there, I was like, Kelly, you've walked into comedy festivals. You've, you know, been in random towns, and you've walked in to be like, hello, I'm here to headline your thing. And so I think that that's really helped me have an understanding of, you know, public speaking. And also, you know, I can't be everyone's cup of tea. Casey Musgraves was very inspirational to me with her song. And it made a lot of, you know, some like the bitter, some like the sweet. Like, you can't be everything to everyone, but you can help people think. And that's been a lot of what I've tried to do with comedy, is talk about difficult things that people might not otherwise talk about. And I find that using humor as an educator, it actually allows people to break down a barrier to let in new information, because you made them laugh, right? And so it helps with rapport. It also, I mean, it's helped me with my writing and all of those sorts of things. And so comedy has, I think it seems it is like a natural fit. And then when you look at, the guy Zelensky, who we're talking about with everything with, you know, Trump right now, he's a comedian. And, you know, there was a fellow I was talking to recently, because I've had some folks who have diminished my intellect because I'm a comedian and not an engineer. Like, how, you know, who does she think she is? And a fellow, he was like, but wait, isn't the IQ of comics like higher than the average? Like, obviously. So I think it only helps. And I did a TED Talk about rape jokes in stand-up comedy, to give you an example of how I talk about difficult things to help us, you know, let in new information. And so, I think comedy has, I probably wouldn't be able to be running right now if it weren't for my background in comedy.
Well, so that's good advice for anyone who wants to run for office. Go do some stand-up first. So I know Texas has a super early primary. So what are you up to in these next couple months in your sprint to the primary?
Yeah, it is a sprint, but I'm very athletic. Well, what I've started, when I made my announcement in August, that I declared that I would be doing a full whistle stop tour in the state of Texas. And that brings back that irony of the fact that the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads. So I've been using the train as a vehicle to deliver information. I was accepted into the Progressive Change Campaign Committee training in Detroit. And so I took the train from San Marcos, Texas, all the way to Detroit and back. And along the way, I took a bullhorn and a milk crate and I stood on it like a soapbox, and I gave stump speeches on the train platforms all the way there and all the way back. And I got some media attention around that. And so we've got some plans for some more train campaigning in Houston and Dallas. And then we've got a network of colleges where I will be hopefully recruiting more volunteers, because the goal is to knock on as many doors as possible, that we can, you know, cover the state as wide as we can. And I'm basically hopping to lots of places, but Houston and Dallas determine about 70% of the vote in Texas. And so that is where I need to concentrate some of my time for the primary. And after I win the primary, I'll be able to, spread myself around Texas to some of the more underrepresented and rural areas. But I am going out to Big Spring in West Texas in a couple of weeks. Howard County and Scurry County have invited me, but there were only, I think, 1,300 people that voted in Howard County in 2018. So it's a weird numbers game, but the goal is to get as much earned media as possible and to reach as many voters as possible through myself and or my network of enthusiastic volunteers.
And so if any of our listeners who are in Texas or outside of Texas want to help out with the campaign, what are some ways they can help?
Well, my website has a whole checkbox list of ways where you could say, here's what I would like to do. I would like to host a party, or I would like to door knock, or I would like to call bank, or I would like to give you money. We need money. That's a weird part of it for me. So votekeystone.com is my website, and it's pretty robust in terms of information and articles and where and how people can sign up to volunteer. They can also, just shoot me an email, info@votekeystone.com. I just had a student from Denton do that yesterday, and they're like, what can I do to organize people? And like, thank you. So I think that would be the best way to reach out to let us know that you're interested in helping. And then a great way to help is show up and vote. Please go vote in the primary because there's less voters on March 3rd than there will be on November 3rd. So we definitely need folks to turn out.
All right, great. And we'll put links to your website and your social media up on our website so people can find that there as well.
I appreciate that.
So, Kelly, always wonderful to talk to another Kelly, another mom. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, and thanks for running it. It sounds like such an important office that I will confess, I don't live in Texas, but still, I had no idea it existed. And I suspect a lot of people in Texas also didn't have any idea.
Yeah, so thank you for helping to amplify. I really appreciate that, and thank you for the work that you guys do in getting word out about candidates.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.